tendency to do what it is that you're talking about, which is laughing at that person or whatever. And that is something, I really learned this truly from the deaf community when I was learning sign language. I've never been laughed at by a deaf person.
And then Pablo says, Annette's passion for culture is evident. Hapa naona One Mic should have a culture hour. Okay?
Now, before you go there,
speaking
speaking of culture, there's a question Pablo has asked over here.
Let me see. First of all, Gracie says, good stuff. Applaud you, lady. What question has Pablo asked?
Does Annette speak Swahili?
I love this
Kikuyu?
question.
No, she doesn't. She just
I know.
she does not speak.
No.
She has a twang for a reason.
No.
Why would they ask?
What?
She has a twang for a reason.
Let her.
You're triggering her now.
Let her answer the question.
Thank you.
Don't answer on herself.
Ali, thank you for
Sorry, Basi.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Those are the assumptions that you made, and those nephews of yours knew what you were saying about them. So don't bring them to the studio.
Flying kick.
Namangum nama flying kick.
I think we need to understand what language means, okay? So if you want me to write an essay in Swahili, it's not going to happen. But let me tell you something, Kikuyus, Kenyans, sorry. Also, I said it the right way the first time. Many of you cannot write an essay in Swahili properly, okay? So let's think about these standards correctly. The point of language in this conversation is about being able to be conversational. And I have the ability to be conversational, but I have been taught that if my accent isn't correct, if it doesn't land in the right way, if my cadence isn't correct, that I'm going to be insulted, I'm going to be laughed at, and all of those things. So yes, my default answer is no, I don't speak Swahili. However, my Swahili speaking people who are outside of the Kenyan demographic have heard me speak more Swahili than my Kenyans have. I have friends who are from West Africa who maybe went to school in Kenya for one reason or another. They've heard me speak Swahili. I have friends who are from Tanzania who teach me that the Swahili that I learned was not even good Swahili because, whatever.
Yeah,
so
it's sanifu.
So,
right?
so let me add on something to that. And here I'm coming, also as a Swahili teacher. There's certain things that I see, like from the older generation that make my blood boil.
Higher.
Okay, tell us.
Okay.
Number one, like when a young person is making effort to speak Swahili, don't overcorrect. Number one. And even when you're correct it from a good place. Don't correct while laughing at them.
And let me just add to that. Let's correct the same way we would a toddler who's never spoken the language before. Because that is exactly the same place you're in, even if you are 10, 20, 30.
So
you don't laugh at that person.
Yeah, it's not your default
How
setting.
dare you laugh at a child who's fallen when they're trying to walk?
It's not, it's
exactly.
not your default
Doing, and this is something that commonly I see, like when the younger generation or that first generation is making an attempt to speak, there's that laughter. How did you say that? Now, what this does, and then you get surprised that your child does not understand the language that is being spoken in the house
and has no interest.
What this technically does in their psyche, it makes them shut down. Like all you're gonna do is laugh at me all the time. It makes them shut down. So this is something that we need to stop. The second thing, people who learn Swahili, as in people who learn Swahili as maybe as grown-ups or even as teens, having been raised here in the English language, they are not gonna sound the way you sound. And I believe this is the same for all other languages that you're gonna teach your kids. 100%. They are not gonna sound the way you sound. This their mother tongue, whether we like it or not, is English. Because you chose to speak to them in English as kids. So their mother tongue, whether you like it or not, is English. So they're gonna have, there's that new Swahili accent that's now coming up with people who were born here, and let's get comfortable with it. There's this young girl, I think she's like 20, 21 years old, called Kekimbili on Instagram. She does an amazing job. She speaks Swahili. She's been learning Swahili, and she speaks with that English accent, but you can understand her. So let's be very comfortable with this, because here's the thing. Most of you who also who are raised in Nairobi and learned your mother tongue, like while you're in Nairobi, you don't sound you don't sound like your grandparents,
bro.
You know, when you speak Kikuyu, or Kijaluo.
Correction.
You don't.
If you can even speak,
there you go.
That's another one.
There you go.
Right.
Ask him if he spoke the language before he came to this country.
I started speaking Kikuyu when I got here.
So that's why I'm saying let's have some grace, because I usually see this a lot, like happening. And some of these people who are laughing, if we sit here to engage in a Kiswahili conversation for half an hour, they themselves will be sweating. But they are happy to laugh at a young person who's going out of their way to try to learn the language.
Let's talk about linguistics and how this works, right? Because the truth of the matter is, for example, when it comes to accents specifically, have you ever talked to a toddler in English in America? They don't make sense.
Yeah,
they never have.
They don't say their words proper. Now they are talking to you with the confidence because they're learning, and we have given them that grace. They talk to you with the confidence as if what they're saying is clear. What happens is, in the home, you learn vocabulary. You learn how to say table, how to say cup, how to say this, that, and you learn vocabulary. Once you leave the home and you realize only the people in my home understand me. This is a child we're talking about, right? 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old, you go to school. That's when you realize the way that I'm saying these words, they don't understand me. And guess what? I want to have friends. So you start listening differently. You're like, okay, it's not just acceptable to know the vocabulary. It's important for me to understand the accent and to do the nuance and the cadence and all of the things that go into language. That's how a child learns a language. So there is the at-home part. Let's do our at-home part better. Give vocabulary, okay? Let's stop insulting people's accents. Let's stop talking about their cadence and give them the vocabulary. And allow them then now to go into these social situations where they have peers. It's important that it's peers who are speaking the language, maybe Kenyans who have come more recently, right? That's when they're going to learn the accent.
That's very powerful,
That's when they're going to learn the nuance and the cadence and the things. You do not need to correct a child. They will correct if the environment allows them the opportunity to learn.
Yes.
Okay.
Gives them the opportunity to make the mistakes.
They make the mistakes and then they realize, the way that I said that thing, that person didn't understand what I was saying. They were confused. You can see the confusion on their face, right? Now, when you're a child, you're so busy trying to figure out how to communicate with each other that the learning is co-optive. When you have an age difference, or if you have someone who speaks a language but another language that you don't know, there is a tendency to do what it is that you're talking about, which is laughing at that person or whatever. And that is something. Well, I really learned this truly from the deaf community when I was learning sign language. I've never been laughed at by a deaf person. They're so excited to see that someone is attempting
to understand,
to communicate with them and learn
in
how
their
to,
language.
Yes.
I have never ever, I'm telling you, not even a snicker. I can say the most foolish thing in sign language and they'll be like, oh, did you mean this? And they'll sign it out in with letters, and I'll say yes, and they will teach me every single time. When I used to work in retail, every single time. I've never been laughed at a deaf person. I am more confident in sign language than some of these languages where people have laughed at me.
Okay, so I think parents, like the ones who are now scratching your heads as to why your kids are not speaking the language, you're probably part of the fault. You're probably part of the reason why they don't, is because they shut down. Like when you keep making fun of them and when you keep laughing at them, they'll just go out. Another comment here coming from Sambaza. He says, those people I mentioned were on the podcast and shared snippets of how they interacted with their parents and community. They came onto the podcast. You'll have to check it out. But also, there was a young singer who was at your show and talked about the way older Kenyans say they're leaving out at a function, but 3 hours later they haven't left. That was a powerful message as she observed a trait. So like I said, it's okay, but we have to be more inclusive to help the younger community. That was Audrey, you know.